was broken and we needed to figure out a way to solve it.
It's a decision to make. You can either keep doing what you were doing, or you can take that next step and adopt a technology that'll really help the firm get to that next level. ArchiCAD is definitely helping us get there.
The way that we even got to it is a firm in LA, Anthony Laney, had reached out. We were doing similar things, but our output was significantly less. So I just called them and I said, hey, what are you guys using? And he said, we embraced ArchiCAD a couple of years ago and it's changed our firm. And for me, like, that's the most important thing. Talking to another architect and them saying, this is what we've done to kind of radically change what we're doing, just sold me.
ArchiCAD felt as if it was designed for designers so that they can sit, work, but then as you're moving through the model and you're designing, you're building it and building it, now you can turn it into 2D drawings. You can also create a set of construction documents. So I felt like it brought both tabs together.
When the Graphisoft rep came, he went along and put that building section, and I was able to see everything three-dimensionally. And that for me was like, wow.
It was like an aha moment of just like, yes, I want to be able to do this with my program. This is great.
Us telling the story of our designs through the drawings is something that we're really trying to learn now with the power of ArchiCAD. And we want to exploit ArchiCAD to really push the limits of that.
Having BIM software opens up things for us, allows us to see things, allows us to develop more quickly, take our ideas, put it into a project, vet the idea, manipulate the idea, and move forward. I think that's something we're really excited about. There's
a lot of moving parts in architecture. There's a lot of things that are going on. Can the program weave that and compress that holistic understanding of design down? And that's what we want to push. And ArchiCAD has been that kind of linchpin that's really tied it together for us.
That's a pretty impressive hero reel right there. That was a fantastic story there. I am joined today by John Patrick Winbury, CJ Canales, and Monty Chapin. Before I introduce John Patrick and CJ, I want to, like I said, I want to introduce Monty Chapin from Graphisoft, and I think selfishly, I want to thank Monty and the entire Graphisoft team because in order to make these conversations happen, right, I get to dig into these conversations with the architects and not only see what they do, see the wonderful work that they do, that they create, but also how they do it. So from a selfish point of view, this is a real thrill to get to talk to a couple of the key players here at the Up Studio and see how they do their work. So first of all, Monty, thank you for this opportunity and to the whole Graphisoft team. But second of all, what's it like, to put together a hero reel like that, I'll call it, what's it like to find the right firm and to tell that story?
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, that's a great question. And it's difficult because when you look at the firms and the work and some of the submissions, to get to that decision process, it's challenging. We are now 4 seasons, actually 5, if you include the last one, the Duke Ellington piece that we just finished up last year. We've done 4 seasons, very different kind of thematically. Working with our agency down in Los Angeles. And from that, then kind of like picking the firm, picking the work, picking the way that they work with ArchiCAD, and kind of putting that all together within the theme of the work. So in the year that we did with Up Studio, the metamorphosis was the theme, the change of the firm and the change in the practice and just the change in the culture. So I think really kind of today, you'll kind of get that out of the conversation with the team is how did it change the firm? What kind of metamorphosis did the firm go through? And it is one of the more exciting things that I've done at Graphisoft. And we continue to look forward to push another season out. Thanks.
Love it. I love it. Yeah, absolutely. And so now let me introduce our 2 participants from Up Studio. First of all, CJ Canales, who is the Director of Architecture at the Up Studio, and John Patrick Winbury, who is a founding partner of the Up Studio in New York City. So guys, welcome. Thanks for joining us for this conversation today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have you here. And so maybe the first question is, what's it like to be to go through this process to produce a video like that?
Yeah, it's funny. Graphisoft had reached out to us as they started to see our studio change, like Monty said, and they asked if they could document, the process of the firm evolving. And it's always nerve-wracking, right? Everyone goes on a diet right before. We want to look good on camera, but it's great. It's amazing that they capture that. I haven't seen that in a little bit, so it was kind of fun to see that and see actually how far that was probably done 5 or 6 years ago, and to know how much we've evolved inside of the program, even in since that was shot, is kind of fun to see from our side.
Yeah, I love it. So, well, first of all, I guess we need to talk to Graphisoft's agency and see if they can get those cameras that take 20 pounds off instead of add 20 pounds. And that may help the stress level a little bit.
Always what we're looking for. Always.
Yeah, it's better than dieting, let me tell you. I'm looking around the room now. So first of all, welcome to everybody that's joining us for this webinar, and also anybody that's watching live from the EntreArchitect community Facebook group. Great to have all of you with us today. This is a fireside chat. It's sponsored by Graphisoft, a partner of EntreArchitect here. And I thought it was a great opportunity for you, number one, to learn a little bit about the Up Studio, who I'm guessing that many of you are familiar with their work, but also find out, like I said at the very beginning, how they work. And to me, right, somebody that doesn't practice architecture, doesn't do architecture anymore, I'm really focused on and really intrigued by the way that firms actually do their work. So I'm looking forward to digging into this. As I look around the room, I'm sure that, again, most people that are joining us here for this conversation are probably architects. They're probably familiar with your work, but can you give us a little bit of background? Where did you start? How did you get started? What kind of work are you doing right now?
Yeah, so we are coming up on 12 years as a studio. And it's evolved immensely in the 12 years, just like every studio. So early on, we were doing a lot of work in New York City, fit outs and retail spaces. And similar to when we actually changed over to ArchiCAD, our studio typology also changed. We got a couple of family homes in and around New York City. That's a typology that we're really, really excited about, and we love exploring our kind of concept-driven stuff inside of that intimate setting. And we found a couple of really interesting clients to take a journey with us. And it's led down this path of being able to really try to set a new bar for our studio each time we get a project and a commission. But right now we're really, really focused on family homes in and around the country. We're lucky to work in many different states. So that's really what we're focusing on. And for the next 5 years, we're kind of really going to try to push the limits of how far we can take it.
So, obviously transition is the theme here. What, before you changed or focused on this typology, and obviously we're talking about this transition to using Graphisoft, using ArchiCAD, what did that look like before? How were you doing projects? I think you drew a line about 5 or 6 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. How were you working prior to ArchiCAD?
Yeah, I'll take this one. CJ and I were debating if we were going to answer this one, but Jeff, the reality is we had 18 programs that we were using. And I know that's with most firms. We just, we were trying to convey the story of our projects, and there was not one single program that could help us from day one of concept all the way down to managing CA process. We were essentially, we would start in kind of a rudimentary 3D program. Then after SD approvals, we would transition to just a straight 2D program. it was a recipe for disaster, right? Because they're not coordinated with each other. We would make changes in the 3D model, which were never reflected in 2D. It was just a very, very, very big issue for us. And then CJ came to the studio about like, maybe we should transition, and think about a different way of our production methods.
So, and like you said, I don't think that's an unusual story for a lot of firms, and probably a lot of the people that are joining us right now or will join us in the future and watch the video on replay. I see that Mark posted the link so you can get the replay of this video. I imagine most people identify with that pretty readily. But what became the tipping point? CJ, you went to the studio and said, hey, maybe we should look at this differently. What's the tipping point? Why, as humans, a lot of us don't like change until, the pain of change is less than the pain of status quo. So what was the tipping point? What made you decide, hey, we probably ought to look at something different here?
I think obviously it definitely became like a workflow issue internally. So we were debating whether switching to a different program, and we attempted said program, but we utterly failed. But I think that was like the start of us having to like, okay, we need to fix our internal workflows. How can we improve that? And we left it for a bit, and then that's when John had come across ArchiCAD, and he was like, oh, we have this is, take a look at this, what do you think? And as soon as I saw it, I was like, yeah, this seems just about right.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question because there are obviously a lot of programs out there, a lot of platforms out there. I think maybe this question was answered in the video that we played to roll in here, but of everything that's out there, the Revits and the chief architects and the, all the other programs that are out there, how did you, and CJ, you said that you tried at least another program. How did you eventually land on ArchiCAD? What was the thing that said, hey, let's give this one a shot?
I think it was mostly having to do with the ability of manipulating things in the program without any constraints. There are other programs that have constraints. You can't do this without doing this first. And I think that hurdle was one of the toughest things that we encountered while we were trying to look into these 3D BIM software programs. And when ArchiCAD came in and into our studio, and we saw the ability to be able to like do things without having to be constricted to certain parameters, that's when we were like, okay, this is definitely the way to go.
Monty, were you one of the, sorry, go ahead, John.
No, and I just to piggyback off that, because when I was able to bring it in and show CJ and the team, essentially I just saw this firm, and I said that in the video. There was this firm out of LA. They had reached out and were very complimentary of some of the projects that we were completing. And I just was looking at their work, and I was like, we're around the same size. Like, how are they producing, significant more than, our studio? It's just like a real, just general inquiry of like, what are you using? I assumed they were using Revit, which they weren't. And they said they were using ArchiCAD and that we should look into it. And like CJ said, as soon as they came in, one of the reps from Graphisoft came into the studio, spun us around, and we were just blown away. We were like, this is, it. And it, just to your point, Jeff, like there are a million programs. That's the reality of where this is right now. But a lot of times, from at least our studio's perspective, we want to look at firms that we admire their work and what they're producing and how are they producing it, because to me, that's the ultimate recommendation. A firm that we respect is using a program that we don't know that much about. Let's find out why. And instantly we realized, that this was going to be the game changer for us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And we can all do that. We can look at peers that are doing work and peers that we respect and learn from them. Monty, I don't know if you were on the team that visited Up Studio, but I know that you probably do this type of thing. When you're talking to a firm that's considering a move, let's just say from literally from 2D CAD to BIM, what are the important things? I mean, you're demonstrating a technology, you're demonstrating a software. From knowing you a little bit, having had conversations in the past, I see Mark Arnold is in the background with us, knowing Mark as well. What's important, not only in terms of quote unquote selling the software, right? But helping a firm gauge what it is that, the tool that they're looking at, what's important about that tool, and how they're actually going to use it in their workflow. What's your approach to that?
That's a good question. I think I told on a prior webinar, when I discovered ArchiCAD back in the mid 90s, ArchiCAD 4.5, my first thought was very similar. I was like, oh my gosh, this works a lot like we work. And I think that's really the hallmark of ArchiCAD, is that it's flexible enough to work the way a firm works and adapt to that workflow. So the answer to the question is, one of the things that we really strove to do is, as we've grown the business and increase, our user base, is to understand the firm. And so our customer success side, the mission of the customer success team, both on the customer experience and the professional service consultants, is to go in and get to know the firm, literally get to know them. What is the workflow? What are you achieving? What is the deliverable? How do you work? Who works with you? What do your consultants do? What are they on? And there's just a litany of these questions that then we get a kind of a full read of the firm, understand how that works, and then we can customize an implementation plan and how that wants to go into the firm, and create enough flexibility in it that it adapts to where they're at today, but where they want to go. And that's really kind of how we go in with each firm. Understand the firm. We're there to be a business partner to help the firm get to where they need to be.
Yeah, I love that. That's that's really important. We'll definitely talk about the business of the work here. I'm still curious, John and CJ. You decided to make the switch. The ArchiCAD team comes in and spins you around the program, for lack of a better term, and understands who you are, what you do. But at some point, you've actually got to step in, right? You've got to step in the water, maybe start to swim. What was the transition like from all of those things that you were using, all those different programs that you were using, one that you tried in the past? What was the transition like from, day zero to, day one and beyond, as you transitioned into ArchiCAD?
Good question. Well, the transition happened in a matter of a few weeks.
Okay.
As a team, we had to all agree to the transition. Obviously, without a unison group, it can't progress. So we all saw the potential of the software, and that's what we thought would be the future of our workflows once we saw the Graphisoft rep spin around the model and show us the actual program itself. What made it easier for us was having the involvement of Graphisoft support team during the transition. They were heavily involved from the start, and within a few days, we went over the basic understanding of the software, going over best practices, setting up our office template, which I have to say is a total must.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent, and John would know here, I'm yelling across the studio, make sure you're pulling stuff from the favorites. But yeah, during the change, there were a few growing pains, like just with any other software, and what software doesn't have growing pains. But just like letting go of those years and years of like working two-dimensionally to now thinking three-dimensionally brought up a lot of internal challenges, because we had to figure out how much time we would have to allocate to modeling. You can model just enough to get your intent through, or fully model everything as to not leave anything up for interpretation. So striking a balance between those two was harder than we thought, but I feel that as of late, we've been able to hit a little bit of a sweet spot on that.
Right. Right. And you talked about things that made it easier, et cetera. So was this whole process easier than you thought it would be, or was it harder than you thought it would be?
I would like to compare it to the other program.
Mhm.
I think it was about 3 months of training, of taking probably even some Saturdays to get the team to be able to transition to this program. But it was only, we were only able to like actually take 2 projects through this program, and nobody else but one person used the program. So I would say that this ArchiCAD was so much easier. It was so much easier to pick up rather than that other program.
So
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, Jeff, and to that, like, I think there's an intuitive nature to the program, you know, coming from like a partner perspective with a firm. It's always, this is a massive decision that we had to make. But we felt that the growth of the studio on the design side was being kind of handcuffed by us trying to do things in 5 different programs and all of that mess. And then, like CJ said, when we tried to go to the big BIM software, Revit, and it just like didn't work. It was so constraining for us that no one bought in. And without the full team buying in, we can't execute this. We need everyone to be learning it together at the same time. There have been very, very exciting moments, and there's been challenges, just like CJ said, with anything. But the fact that we're all in it together, and at a moment's notice, we can reach out to Graphisoft and say, hey, look, we're really struggling with this, this one feature. How do we get through this to help? We have a deadline. We have to get this thing out, which is the inevitable nature of transition, is that you still have your deadlines. You still have everything that you need to execute. And how do you do that? It's only when everyone is buying in. CJ championed the program early on. So we had someone in the studio that we could always rely on that was diving a little deeper than everybody else, because all the other workflows inside of the studio, design or getting business or any of the other things that need to happen, have to remain. All that stuff has to happen. But having a champion in the studio really helped us kind of have like a, just a little guiding force to get this thing implemented as quickly as we did.
So is that the best advice? I know there are others, there are people that are watching this right now that are participating in this webinar, maybe watching it in the future, the recorded version of this, that are where you were several years ago. Maybe it's transition from 2D to BIM, or maybe it's from some program to another program. They're not satisfied, or whatever the situation is what's the best advice in terms of getting everybody on the same page and selecting? Because as you said, you had all these other things, you tried something else. Is it having a champion for change? Is that the key? Because change is hard, especially when it becomes, we're a family of 4, one's off at college now. When there are 3 of us home, when there's 2 of us home, it's hard enough to decide what we're having for dinner, right?
Sure.
If it's just me, I'm skipping dinner. But if there's 2, now all of a sudden it's more complex. If there's 3, it's really complex. The 4th one comes home, forget it. You may as well just think about breakfast tomorrow.
Exactly.
It's worse. It's right. It's worse when we get to running our offices. So what is the key to getting everybody on board in making a change and transition like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think from our side, our studio's perspective, there was a couple of things that were happening simultaneously. One, we realized working in 2 or 3 programs was not, like, it wasn't feasible. Our projects were getting more complex very quickly, and our clients were allowing us to push limits that we hadn't been able to get to yet, but the software was failing us. So we knew like status quo was not the solution. And then we got mildly burnt by trying to, like CJ said, we spent 3 months ramping ourselves up for the big program, and it just didn't take hold. People felt, you could sense the aura in the room very, very quickly. And it was like, the buy-in just didn't happen. It felt like it was too much of a jump for us. It felt like it was made for scales of projects that we weren't working on. And I think the or the click for us was this one, again, initially seeing how fluid the program was. It felt very intuitive. It felt light, which is something that we like to say, like, we want things to be light. We want to be able just to do our thing. We don't want to be kind of bothered with some of the constraints that are happening. And it felt like that on day one. The program just felt light to us. So the buy-in almost happened like very quickly, because everyone was like, this actually makes intuitive sense. Like, this is how I would draw a wall, or this is how I would think about, the registration of a trim detail, or any of those things that were happening early on while we were learning the program. It just felt intuitive. So like, I don't think anyone in the team, CJ can correct me, but I don't think anyone in the team like stood up and was like, this isn't going to work. It's like almost like overnight. I just think we were all ready for it. And having the champion just made it a lot easier for us, that when it got hard, because it did, it's not none of this stuff is like, if it was super easy, everyone would just do it, right? So like, it is a commitment. But it just radically changed our workflow. And I couldn't see it any other way at this moment. So, having that champion when it got tough was really, really helpful. And we're all indebted on the studio side for CJ to put up with all our crazy questions. Especially for me. I'm not gonna, I'm like the older of the group here, so.
So when, we talked about workflow a lot, and I know that there are folks in this community that that still love the craft in the field, or craft in the feel of hand drafting, right? And of course, there's sketching, there's hand drafting, there's 2D CAD, there's BIM, all of these things that we're talking about. It's such a I think back to, what's this business like? What's this business like today? What was it like a long time ago when I graduated and came out into the field? One of the, I think, common denominators across 30 some years since I've been out is collaboration. So when you have made this transition, has it changed? I know the workflow, certainly the producing the work, the telling the story of the design and how it needs to be constructed, but has it actually changed the way that you're going from, this idea or this imagination to, early meetings with clients, and then working in the studio, maybe even with partners, engineers and others? What's that been like, and how is the change to BIM and ArchiCAD? How has that changed?
It's definitely been an interesting change, and a good change. I think obviously using AutoCAD for, I don't even know how many years now, is everything is two-dimensional, but the fact that you go into this BIM software, ArchiCAD, and you start drawing walls and they're automatically three-dimensionally drawn already, the ability to spin within the model and look at every aspect of a project at a moment's notice, being able to cut sections three-dimensionally, being able to see, like, zoom into these like very important aspects of a project so early on, it has been like a lot, like almost like blown mind at certain moments, right? So for us, like, you talk about collaboration. Yes, we all log into this project from our own desks. We're able to reserve certain items. We're able to release certain items. Everybody is able to make changes. We send and receive, and you get an updated set of drawings. And then the added benefit of this as well is being able to even bring a consultant on board and also be within the same model and work within the same model. So now we have a structural engineer who logs into our BIM cloud, access our projects, he reviews, he changes structure within there, and then we receive the changes, and there it is. And like, there's that, it's like almost like right now is like, I'm like, this is awesome. How did we not have this so much earlier, right? Because you can take a set of drawings, send your backgrounds to the engineer. They might interpret it differently, right? Because you're looking at things two-dimensionally. But now they're able to actually spin the model and be like, hey, you know, I would have never caught that if it wasn't in 3D. So there's right there, it's communicating what the intent is. So I think for me, it's been a great tool for collaboration between the consultants, not only consultants internally, obviously, but also with the client, being able to show three-dimensionally what they can't read two-dimensionally.
So you mentioned your structural engineer is using ArchiCAD. Did you have to change any engineers or ask some of your consultants or some of your engineers to switch or start using a different program than they were already using?
Yeah, we did. Well, they actually worked, I don't remember the name of the program, but they worked already in 3D. So the switch wasn't as tough as it would have been if they hadn't. So it's been a good transition, at least for that person to be able to join our team and our projects, be able to fly through some of those scenarios in there. But I think there is some obviously learning curves, especially if they were in a different software. So it's still a work in progress for sure.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, Jeff. So there are some consultants that we still use that are in Revit, and we're just exporting IFCs and doing that. That is definitely a workflow that it's like anything in life. It just takes time to get used to of how to do that. The benefit is far outweighs the inconvenience of exporting it out into a different program. But I do think, to CJ's point about finding consultants, and we're constantly looking for new consultants. It's just the way that, you know, we're always looking for people that are thinking the way that we are. So our structural engineer decided that they wanted to take that journey with us. So they moved over to ArchiCAD, and it's been, like CJ said, just such an amazing thing. We're looking with our MEP consultants. You know, a lot of them are still, even if they're in Revit, they're still not like fully modeling all of the piping or HVAC ducts, which is, we're just internally doing it on our own because we have their drawing. And it's not the best solution right now, but it's allowing us to do conflict resolution virtually, which is obviously the only goal. We want to avoid an 8-inch pipe going into a 4-inch wall, right? That's the simple game that we all struggle with. And the program affords us to quickly model out, even if it's not our stuff, we can do it. I think our ultimate goal, and CJ again has been championing this, is that working with a full consultant team that is kind of all in the same program is ideal for sure. It doesn't have to be that way, but it definitely is something that is, just as a workflow, a benefit, that everyone can share the same model.
Yeah. Are you finding a lot of consulting engineers out there that are using ArchiCAD? I would assume, my own assumption, again, not having, done architecture for a number of years now, but I would assume that a lot are on the quote unquote industry standard programs. how many people, how many consulting engineers are you running into? Are you having any difficulty finding people that are already on ArchiCAD?
There's a bunch. I mean, I think it's anything. The thing that's interesting about technology, just as a general rule right now, nothing has to be local, meaning that we can use consultants from different states. It does present at times just some nuance into the local municipalities, but mostly that's just a small learning curve. So we want to leverage technology in the sense that we can all be, we all don't have to be next door, which is a very different way of thinking from 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So I think we want to utilize that, and that's how we found a wide group. So there's a number of really great consultants that do it for sure.
Yeah. So what's this, when we get beyond design and we get beyond the workflow, what has this changed from 2D? And I know you've been at it for a while, so you can see some results here. What is the change from the 2D CAD to BIM? What does that mean? What has that meant in terms of your business? I would say first on your efficiency and whatever metrics that you're using to judge success in the studio.
So and this is just from our personal experience. I think initially there is one path when you go to BIM that it's going to be this magic solution in the sense that like you draw a plan and it creates your elevation, right? That's like this old adage that a lot of people talk about. Now, being in the program for so long, I think that's a small benefit because yes, it's saving production time of not having to replicate drawings, but what we did internally is actually use the time savings that the program affords to allow ourselves to push more time into design, which is really, honestly, from our studio's perspective, our only goal. And that's not every firm, but we've made a commitment that like whatever we do to improve the studio's efficiency is not to like do anything but give that back into the design process to try to further the designs as far as we can take them. So just like from a math perspective, we're very adamant about tracking our time in our projects. So I would say on average, let's say a house that we're doing takes us about 1,000, let's say like 1,500 hours now is like our, a pretty much a good number if we're averaging it. When we were younger, we were using less time, but we weren't spending time on the design. Like we weren't able to push it because we had to do all this other stuff that the program now affords us to. So now of the 1,500 hours that we have on the production side, it's really only like 500 or 600 hours. And really a lot of the concept and SD and DD of where we're doing all the fun stuff, at least from our studio's perspective, is really it's like ramped up by the program because it's allowing us to funnel all of our energy up to that front. So it's what we have found personally, and again, I don't want to think of this as across the board. We find that what BIM has done to us is like we've essentially taken CDs and we've cut them in half, and that time that we've saved has now gone back to concept, schematic, and design development. That's how we're allocating. Other firms are taking that extra time and making more profit in the project, or that's I think another way to look at it. We've just kind of gone a different way with it.
That's really interesting to me. So has that changed then? I assume if we call that a metric, right? Your ability to dig into the design, spend more time on the design. Has that then meant an improvement in the quality of your projects? And has that changed the way that maybe that you're seen in the marketplace or the way that you compete for projects?
1,000%. It's like it's night and day. That's why when I was watching that video, that was one of the first couple of projects that we were doing in ArchiCAD. And the projects that we're producing now are just at a different level. It's just we've been very, very lucky that our commissions are coming in that are a little are more adventurous. Our clientele has become way more interested in seeing how far we can push the limit. And then the program is just now even more valuable to us because we're able to execute. Where CJ is leading the project that we're doing in upstate New York right now. It's essentially on a, it's built into a like a descending hill. It's the most complex project we've ever done as a studio. In no way, shape, or form could we have completed this project at the level that is going to be completed without the use of ArchiCAD, in my opinion. It's night and day. It can't even, like, I can't register. It's taken us years to get to that point. I don't want to like make this thing that like it's a magic switch. It's an effort, just like anything. We do this stuff because we love it, and it's a tremendous amount of commitment to do it. But that project is going to be, hopefully when it's completed, the cornerstone of our studio, and it is that because of the program, in my opinion. Well, I mean, the program has afforded us the ability to be able to execute at that level.
Yeah, that's a great outcome. Interesting twist on probably the way that some people look at it, as you said. So I know we're swinging up towards the top of the hour, and we want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A. But so maybe we can wrap up the conversation piece of it with just asking, and any of the three of you or all three of you can jump in on this if you'd like. What's one piece of advice that you would have for a firm, I would say, that's either thinking of transitioning from 2D CAD to BIM, or it could be I guess, and or someone that is using a BIM program, whatever it is, and they just don't feel like it's worth it. They don't feel like they're getting what they had hoped out of it. What advice do you have for firms that would fall in those camps? Anybody want to kick that off?
This Monty here. I'll kind of piggyback on your metric question. So one thing that we do, getting to know a firm, particularly small firms, 1 to 5, everyone wears a lot of caps in a small firm, and they're trying to grow the business. So we often say, do you follow any metrics? And more often than not, they're chasing their tail, and no, we really don't. Are we profitable at the end of the year? Do we make money? So there's 3 of them we kind of say, you can follow and look at your productivity rates. They change over the course of time. Your utilization rates change over the course of time. And there's one that's an interesting one, and that's net effective multiplier. It's at the end of the day, what is an individual making in the firm? Back to John's comment then, is where do you want to trade that off at? Because in your utilization rate, for example, we know that we see time and time again, a firm assigns less FTEs to a project. That means they can allocate to other projects. More people get more work done, or as John said, you can trade that time and push it forward into the design. So when we talk to a firm, it's like, what do you really want to achieve? And there's just some guiding metrics that help a firm kind of go to where they need to be or want to be. And so there's these little subtle things that also go into play that are about running the business, running the practice. And so I would say, kind of when you talk about going to BIM, what are you trying to capture here? Where are you trying to head with this? So that would be my advice.
That's great advice. John or CJ, you want to share a piece of advice for firms that may either be considering transitioning from 2D to BIM, or have a program that they're, for some reason, right, it just hasn't clicked with them, or however they define it, and they're thinking about something else? Any advice for them?
Come on, Siege. Give him some good advice. CJ's like our champion, so I want him to.
Well, I would say if you're going from 2D to 3D, I would say go for it. It's just it. I think it really depends on the type of work they do. Obviously, if it's a small firm, I would say yes. It's a big firm and you do large projects, I would say, probably not this type of program, but maybe Revit, where it's like you could just pancake a bunch of things. But if you're more design oriented and you like the freedom, then it's ArchiCAD. That's my recommendation.
I'll say this, that I think any transition is hard. There has to be commitment to it. It's just like another design project. It's like, how do we interact this program to better ourselves? I think Monty's point of like, what is your metric? Like, what are you trying to gain? They asked us that question. The two things that we said to them was, we want to prevent errors from happening in our projects, which were happening because we were using multiple programs. And two, we want more time to design. Those were our two metrics. Those are the things that we as the Up Studio wanted to solve. Everyone's metric obviously is different, what everyone's goals are. And then they catered the program to kind of help us there. Also, one other thing, it's a more macro thing. CJ had mentioned this. When Graphisoft does this very nice thing, because there's a lot of amazing design studios, and they knew we were design oriented. So they sent us to this firm in Brooklyn, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head. They were modeling all the way down to like doorknobs and molding. Like, I hadn't seen anything like it in my entire life. Like, it was the most complex thing. And that was a little overwhelming for us, because early on we were like, oh, we want to do that. We want to model everything. And I think that's the balance that CJ talked about before of like, how do we actually, when do we stop on our modeling? And I think it's a learning process. It takes you 5, 6, 7 projects to figure out what's the sweet spot to get your design intent withheld during the build end, but still make sure that you don't go overboard on modeling. So that's a learning process for anyone that's making the jump. But look, it's difficult, it's tricky, but it brings you for the next 20 years. So it's like, to me, it's just like we're all going there. So the faster that we can all embrace it, I think is really the best outcome for everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I would love to see we've modeled the doorknobs version.
It's intense. We have a couple of projects, Jeff. Anytime you want, we can swing you around. It gets it gets nutty.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. All right. Well, that's great advice, and we really appreciate the whole conversation here. We do have a number of questions in the Q&A box here. So, Mark, unless you want to do it a different way, I thought I would just jump in and kind of run through these questions and get them done. And so Ryan I just saw this in chat because it's about doorknobs. Ryan Shoup is a door hardware consultant, architect and door hardware consultant. And he says knobs, but not levers. So,
oh, we have levers too. Don't worry, Rob. We have it all. We're locked in right now.
It's Ryan. It's your dream, I think. There you go. All right. Ace asks, does Graphisoft have an equivalent to Autodesk's ACC cloud ecosystem with the compatibilities that they have? Examples of compatibilities include live BIM model syncing, a cost estimation module, QC issue tracking, etc. That might be a Monty question.
Yeah, so we have a cloud environment, the BIM cloud environment. There's also a BIM cloud SaaS where we take even care of the infrastructure. So your models, depending on, again, trust, there is trust in this. So I'll say that if you want the model to be live amongst all the team members or stakeholders, you have that ability to do that. Or you can kind of silo it too. So, it's kind of where a firm is at. the answer to the other parts, yeah, there's ecosystems of, you know, add-ons, and of course, ArchiCAD has a programming language, the GDL, which allows you to script, and there's a Python and JSON environment. So, you know, you can take it into your own kind of ecosystem. Plugins that are even outside of the environment, like on Rhino Grasshopper, there's a whole series of plugins in their eco environment. You can bring that data back into ArchiCAD. So the answer is yes. We're all kind of going to the cloud, and I think in technology, we have a similar equivalent. And one thing we didn't talk about here was the BIMX, with the power of BIMX, I think, from the office to the field and any other stakeholder, including the owner. I'll leave it at that. So I think it's a matter of a conversation with Graphisoft to see again what you're trying to achieve and what our equivalencies are.
Yeah. Well, I think along those lines, Charles has a question that's a few down in the mix here, but he asks, are there any opportunities for client interface? And maybe that's what you're alluding to there.
Yeah, the BIMX is, I'm sure that UpStudio probably deploys it probably on every project multiple times a day. You can talk to this. The BIMX is really such a phenomenal tool because it goes to a phone or a tablet, Mac or iOS or Android. And the model is there and you can explore it. And along with the model is the documentation. And it's just such a phenomenal communication tool to a client or to a consultant or to the field, even the contractors, to have that ability to see it. And it approaches near real time in terms of changes that occur can be pushed back out to it. So
Yeah, Jeff, I can just quickly speak on that too, to Monty's point, just because it's just like a terminology thing. So essentially in our Graphisoft, our ArchiCAD model, we can take that model and export it out to this BIMX software. And that software essentially just lands on our iPad or our phone. We give it to our clients, we give it to all of our consultants, we give it to all the GCs on site. It's the most powerful thing about the program because it's not just the 3D model, it's the 150-page PDF set that they can flip through. And then they said, hey, UpStudio, you didn't give us section 800 of this one little door detail, but now they can actually use the model because we model almost everything. They can just zoom in and see our design intent without having to ask a question on it. So the BIMX for us is one of the most powerful tools that we've ever used in our studio to communicate our design intent to all the people that are helping us execute our projects.
Oh, great. That's good to know. Sarah Lee has a question. I'm going to boil it down here because I think we've touched on several different pieces of this, but her question is really about transitioning from BIM to BIM. So in her example, from Revit to ArchiCAD, you've talked about, CJ and John, you've talked about the struggles you've had with it. You had onboarding and getting everybody on board with a different program. So calling that, not the right program for us, and then moving to ArchiCAD. So Sarah Lee's question is, why move from BIM to BIM? Could touch on that, but she wants to know, is ArchiCAD easier to learn than Revit, which may or may not be the program that you were talking about earlier? Is there a good, what's the good reason to say, hey, this isn't the right one, let's go try something else, I guess?
I think that really comes down to your processes within the program. I think our studio is design oriented, so we tend to do things conceptually first. And for us in Revit, it didn't give us the opportunity to explore those early concept driven designs, and because there's so many constraints in Revit. I mean, right now, I think since the time we attempted to use Revit, they might have come up with something else that might have enhanced that. But at the time, that was one of the struggles that we had in the program, is that having all these preset constraints prevented us from actually being able to dig deep into the program. And that was one of the things that ArchiCAD was able to provide us, is the ability to be free within the program.
Yeah, and Jeff, like I was saying before, like light, it was just like when we're in that early concept phase, like we're not getting into the door levers yet, right? We're just not. Like, we want to be very macro on day one, and we need the program to be light and adaptable for us on that. And ArchiCAD, why we went from one BIM to another is just because ArchiCAD provided us that type of flexibility that the other programs were not affording us. It was a really very, very clear distinction at the time, for sure.
And I think it's important to point out that when you're talking about the way that you use this tool, right? These are all tools that we're talking about. I've been working on my kitchen for a while, doing a renovation on the kitchen. So I've got a box of tools sitting there, right? And there's a hammer and there's a wrench, and all of these things play a role. When you're talking about ArchiCAD, you're not using that, and this is not to diminish anybody's work in any way, but you're not looking at ArchiCAD as just a tool to produce construction documents. You're going all the way, using this all the way through conceptual design, right?
Yeah, from day one to the end. It's the first program that we've been able to stay in one ecosystem the entire time. So with the power of BIMX early on, we can share kind of walkthroughs and stuff with the client, so they feel very connected to the overall concept that we're doing. But it starts on day one of our studio. It's the first thing that we do in project startup. And it's with us till we close out the project. And it's the first time we've been able to stay in one program all the way through.
Yeah. So, and again, that might be something that Monty would ask you from day one is, how are you going to use this tool? What do you want to do with it? Graham says, if I have tools in my kitchen, then my wife and his wife ought to have a conversation. It's probably true. Diego wants to know, with the yearly release and update cycles that are so common with software, have you found it challenging to keep your template up to date, with those different releases, or has it added some friction in the process?
Yeah, it has, and I think that's inherent with what it is. But I have to kind of weigh the pros and cons of it, and it's our studio. We're part of the subscription where we can upgrade every year, but we have to kind of like weigh in whether the software at the time is something that we should move forward with, just because of the fact of, like, being able to update the template is something that we take careful analysis of, just because it's intense to be able to keep that up to date with the new releases. But when we see the opportunity to see that, okay, there's features that are worth the upgrade, and yeah, we'll go in, and we're doing that now. We're in the process of updating our template now for the latest release. So yeah, it's just a part of the process.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's something that we're probably all pretty used to at this point. We are right at the top of the hour. We need to be really respectful of everybody's time. So I think we'll wrap it up right there. But a couple of things. We're going to, as we roll out here, I'm going to play another video. The Up Studios work was featured in, I think it was season 1, episode 1 of episode America by Design on CBS. So I'm going to play that clip as we roll out here. But in the meantime, if you'd like to know more about the work of the Up Studio, go to theupstudio.com. That's their website. Chris Novelli commented earlier, I think I saw in the chat, that your website is fantastic. He loves the design, loves the work. on your website. So that's a good
Thank
thumbs
you.
up there.
Cheers.
So reach out to John, reach out to CJ, go to theupstudio.com. And then Monty, for more questions about Graphisoft and ArchiCAD, where should we go? Should we reach out to you, or should we point them to the Graphisoft website? What's the best contact place?
I would say the first place is the graphisoft.com, and then the contact information is there. So that's the best place usually to start. And then that'll get you in touch with somebody, either a professional services consultant, or the customer success team, or the sales team.
All right, great, love it.
And I'm always happy to also, I think my email address is here, so I can also direct to that individual.
Yeah. And one thing I would say, and again, I don't quote unquote do architecture anymore, so I'm not a Graphisoft customer, but I do get to interact with the Graphisoft team from time to time. And I'll tell you that I have never been turned on to a software person or a SaaS software salesperson. It's always somebody like Monty that has been there and done that, that's been in the same trenches that you are in or have been in. And I think that says a lot in terms of a company that's really devoted to serving techs as their customers. So kudos to the whole Graphisoft team for that. Again, this is just me, giving my thumbs up, but I really appreciate the way that your whole team approaches this. So with that, to John, to CJ, to Monty, thank you. To the whole Graphisoft team, thank you. Mark, there in the background, thanks for helping us navigate this conversation. And I'm going to roll us out with this video. Hopefully I do this smoothly, but I'm going to roll us out with this portion of this episode from America by Design, which aired on CBS. It's season 1, episode 1. And let me see if I can do that without shutting this whole thing down accidentally. So give me 1 second here.
Thanks again from the Up Studio.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What was interesting about the Harbor Hideaway project was how the design team was quite clever about a constrained site. Even though it's a tiny project, the use of the blocks, using the rooftop, and the cladding is beautiful. It's an amazing little piece of jewelry in South Harbor.
One of the most exciting things about design is challenging norms and rethinking experiences. Sometimes you need to turn things upside down. That's exactly what the architects did at the Up Studio here at Harbor Hideaway. Hey, John, why did you call it Harbor Hideaway?
Yeah, the client came to us with, they wanted privacy at street. So we came up with a solution of removing all the doors and windows, which gives us a really nice backdrop for this Carl Fisher grass to play off of.
Great. And then is this that Japanese siding?
It's actually our interpretation of it. We took natural redwood siding and we stained it twice in a factory and just applied it directly to the facade.
Oh, cool. And tell me about this detail up at the top that looks performative.
Yeah, so this is a shade ribbon. We're really interested in this idea about sustainability in our architecture. So here we're using a shade ribbon as a way to block that summer sun directly coming into the bedrooms. And then we wrap it into a carport, which then ties into this exterior trellis and then registers back into the architecture.
Oh, I see. What is a small detail outside ends up becoming a pretty major feature inside the house.
Yeah, that's one of our goals, is to take the proportion of that exterior trellis and bring it into the architecture. We think that's a really, really important detail for sure.
And this is great. I love that you expose the columns, and it really creates these thresholds into the living room in an otherwise open space.
Yeah, we love the idea that the architecture is here. Let's just expose it and let it really show what it's doing.
Yeah, and all of this storage, I'm so jealous.
Yeah, so this is an additional 42 linear feet of storage. Once we remove those doors and windows, it really allowed us that workhorse.
And you don't miss the doors and windows because you have these really beautiful floor-to-ceiling expansive windows here.
Yeah, so this was done by Marvin. It's their custom package. And it really, really brings out that outside energy into the inside for the family.
I love the pool location, but from experience, I know that there has to be a reason.
Yeah, on any compact site, we all know that there's really tricky zoning. This is actually the only spot legally that we could put the pool on the entire property.
That's a happy accident.
It is, and it started our project, and we love how it integrates back into the architecture.
You know, I have to say, so far the house feels much larger than 2,800 square feet.
Thank you. I think 4 bedrooms, 5.5 baths. Sometimes, how do we fit that all together? But I think the floor-to-ceiling glazing really makes it feel a lot more open.
You know, smaller projects are some of my favorite to work on because you really have to be creative, and you've done that here.
Thank you so much. I think to your point, these small footprints, every inch counts. The team is really integral in making sure that every aspect of the project came together.
Well, they've made it look effortless.
Thank you so much.
Wow, this view is spectacular.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we love giving this back to our families and have them occupy the roofs.
It seems like there's a very intentional hard line between the turf and the decking. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, typically when we occupy a roof, half of it is for entertainment and then half of it is for solar. We're going to wait about a year to check the energy consumption and then hopefully convert that over.
That's such a good use of space. I can't believe the neighbors aren't doing this too.
Krista, we talk about this all the time. We want families to occupy these roofs. It's the most sustainable thing, but also it's just giving these views back to the families.
Well, I really noticed that throughout the entire project, you really kind of controlled all the views to really script the narrative of how this house is supposed to live. And this is just capped with a surprise.
Yeah, thank you so much. We love this.
What I really liked about the School of Art Institute of Chicago was that they prioritized function, and they did the best that they could to do a.
Thanks again, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. That was, for those of you that missed it, America by Design, Season 1, Episode 1, featuring the Sag Harbor House by the Up Studios. So fantastic project, by the way. Thank you to all of you in the audience for joining us again. Reach out, theupstudio.com, graphisoft.com. Look for John Patrick Winbury, look for CJ Canales, and look for Monty Chapin over at Graphisoft. Thanks again to the Graphisoft team. We appreciate this and everything that you do, and we'll see all of you sometime soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks so much.